Hey guys, I'm running a couple minutes late today, but hi, I'm happy to be here. And today we're going to be talking about really breaking down intimacy, what intimacy really is, how to access it, how to recognize it, and how to recognize when you don't have it in your life. It's such a intangible concept, isn't it? So we're going to break all this down today. Hi, I'm Melissa Keenan. I'm CEO and owner at Coaching with Melissa Keenan. I help women and couples create the intimacy of their dreams. And I am also a USA Today bestselling author. It just happened earlier this year. So you can go check out my book, Younger Self Letters, on Amazon. So intimacy, right? You know, I actually had this thought recently that I wonder how many of even my clients have walked away with like a tangible understanding of what intimacy is, and to be able to clearly say, yes, this is it, and I know when I have it, and no, this is not it, and I know when I'm not experiencing it, because it is such an intangible experience, isn't it? Intimacy is so interesting. If you're watching today, I would love for you to say hi in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from, where you live, and say hi, because this is such an important, I realize I talk about really vulnerable things on here, you guys, and that's probably why you're here. You like hearing the real stuff. But the sooner you're willing to also say, hey, I like the real stuff, and say, hey, and create connections in this community, the more progress you're going to make towards experiencing intimacy. Okay, so let's break down, first of all, this concept that I think a lot of us are not experiencing true intimacy. I know I lived most of my life without it. Probably till I was about 28 years old. Fleeting moments. A recent friend of mine said, it feels like pockets. I can identify pockets of intimacy, but not a consistent, intimacy as a way of being, right? And I would relate with that. I can identify some key, powerful moments in my life where I really felt connected, either to God, to the child that I was birthing at the moment, to my husband, even to myself. And then the rest of the time, it just felt so disconnected and confusing. Anybody relate with that? Pockets of intimacy? I think most of us are not experiencing true intimacy on a regular basis, for sure. We aren't even given the opportunity to know what that looks like. So let's talk about what intimacy isn't first. And I'd love if you'd share in the comments some of the things that you can think of when you think of some of these intimacy counterfeits. So the first thing that comes to mind are soap operas, which I thought that those were not a thing anymore because I have a Roku. I don't even have a TV subscription, but I was at my aunt's house the other day, and she's old and she still has a TV subscription, and she's got this soap opera on. I'm like, oh, those still exist. Soap operas are like the classic. Everybody knows it's so cheesy and it's so fake, right? And you watch the interactions, you're almost not surprised when Johnny Suave comes in and says, you're right, I've cheated on you for the 5th time, or whatever. Am I right, you guys? So soap operas are a great example of counterfeit intimacy. Share some of your ideas. What do you think of when you think of counterfeit intimacy? We could kind of break this down even more personally. Do you know those moments as a mom when your kids are trying to get your attention and they're all jazzed up about something, and your mind is so preoccupied with something else? And it could be anything, right? Like maybe you just got a giant medical bill you're super worried about, or like, or your marriage is falling apart, or like something. It could be legitimate, or it could just be like, you're really worried and you didn't figure out what to make for dinner that night or something, right? But your mind is preoccupied and you're just sort of like, oh, you look at them and you give them this smile. Yeah, honey. Okay. Yeah. And maybe you repeat something that they said. Okay. Yeah. And then you go back to what you were doing. That's a good example of counterfeit intimacy. And I don't share that to shame anybody, right? We all have those moments. That's why I can recount it so perfectly. It's because, we all have those moments. But I think it's a good example, right? And I'm surprised that actually nobody's sharing here in the comments when you think of counterfeit intimacy. Maybe you've never thought about it before. Some other things that I think about those moments with your spouse when you've been talking about something that you wanted him to do differently or change. You've been talking about it for a long time. It's been like difficult. And then it's really difficult. It gets to this point where it's so tense and it feels like you've had a breakthrough because he finally says, okay, I'm going to do XYZ, which is the thing that you've been wanting him to do all this time. And so you get excited and you feel like, oh, this is a breakthrough. But the whole time something feels off. In fact, even after the conversation is over, somehow you feel guilty. Like, shoot, did I just coerce him into doing that? Did he say yes of his own volition? Did I sort of control him? Was I being naggy? Or, and then there's all these things going on in our head, right? And then he does the thing for like a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, and then goes back. That's another example of counterfeit intimacy, right? It's like, oh, we think we're making breakthroughs together, but actually he's just finally decided to like give in and cave and try to do what he thinks you want him to do, or try to be whatever it is that you're saying he needs to be. But really inside, he's not there yet. Something's not clicking yet. And you could feel it all the way through. Is anybody relating with this? You could feel it from start to finish, but you weren't quite sure. And so you just you want to assume the best of the situation, right? Anybody understand that place, that feeling? What are some other examples of counterfeit intimacy? Because I think this is so important. I know so many of you are in here because you feel this longing in your heart for more. You want to experience a depth in your relationships, and you're like, I don't know how. I don't even know if it's possible. I talk to a lot of women who will say, well, the thing is, I know I've come to this point where I know I can't control my husband. Like, I know I can't get anybody else to change but me. And so therefore I have just allowed him to be himself, and I might kind of resent it, but it works for us. And I call BS on that. That's counterfeit intimacy. Because when you say, I've just learned to accept, but I also feel resentment, it's not true acceptance, right? So often I see women in this pattern because we just want to be content. We want things to be easy, right? And but often when we say, "Oh, I am content. I have found acceptance," it's actually gone into the realm of more complacency. I'm complacent. And to me, when I identify complacency in myself, it feels like death before death. I just don't like complacency. Contentment, yes. Complacency, no. And how do you know the difference? The resentment. That's your key indicator. Is this clicking, you guys? Okay. So I think we've really covered, no. There was one more that I really wanted to cover here. Physical intimacy, huge. And if you've been following me for some time, you've probably heard me talk about duty sex. I do not encourage duty sex in any way, shape, or form in any of my coaching with any of my clients. This duty sex is a perfect example of a counterfeit to intimacy. And this one, I tread lightly in this because typically, if we're doing this, there are reasons. Like we have trauma in our past. We haven't felt like we can say no when we mean no, or say yes when we mean yes. We've learned patterns of survival to like sort of leave our body while going through something that we didn't really mean a full yes to. And that's how we kind of cope. And it can go pretty deep there. All of those things can be healed 100%, you guys. If you find yourself like, oh, this is stinging like crazy, and I'm just here to say I have done all of those things and I have healed them from the inside out. Every once in a while, something will creep in and I just get to say to my husband, hey, can we pause? I need to explore what this is. Like there's a wall here. I need to explore this. Can we pause? And we'll explore that together. And that, my friends, is true intimacy. Intimacy is into me, see. So anytime you're feeling inside like there's something a little bit off and I can't quite put my finger on it, it's likely that you're not experiencing the truest, fullest version of intimacy. It's a counterfeit. And it's hard to know in this day and age because we're shoved counterfeits all the time. You know, I think about even my parents' relationship, and my guardians that raised me, their relationship. I think about even, you know, in our upbringing, did we ever actually see a couple that was experiencing true intimacy? And if we had seen that, would we have even known enough to be able to say, oh, there it is? Something inside knows always. It's like, ah, oh, yes, there it is. But, you know, from a child's perspective, I don't know that I would have even known how to recognize it. That's why these conversations are so important. Is this resonating, you guys? Are we hitting this? Now I'm beginning to wonder if comments are coming in and I just can't see them. Ha! That's what it was. Cool. Okay. Okay, so let's shift gears then. Are we ready to shift gears and talk about true intimacy? I called this live a steady, raw diet of true intimacy. Raw and intimacy. Kind of interesting, right? It sort of has a little like, do I like raw? I'm not sure. Am I supposed to like raw? Right, you guys? So, Nadia, hi, it's good to see you in here. As if this was some sort of real way of seeing you. It's not. Right? What we do here, this is probably kind of like intimacy counterfeit. I'm like pretending I can see your faces, pretending I can know your reactions. But anyway, hi, dear. Okay. True intimacy. So I've had a lot of people come to me and say, I know that intimacy is the thing I struggle with. Anybody relate with that? I know that intimacy is the thing I struggle with. And I hear lots of different things around it, like I'm afraid to be deeply seen. And yet at the same time, we want to be deeply seen so much. We're afraid to be deeply known and understood. But on the same token, we want so much to be known and understood on a deeper level, to be valued for the essence of who we are, not just for what we do or what we can accomplish in the world, right? We want those things. We want to be able to stand naked and unafraid and uninhibited before our husband, and yet we find ourselves turning off all the lights, keeping on as many clothes as possible, avoiding the situation altogether. And yet in our heart of hearts, we want that depth. And so we talk and talk around it, but we never actually get to it. Intimacy, truly at its core, is a way of being. And this is what I support women with all the time, is to access that, to begin to taste it, to begin to recognize that I can experience intimacy with nature. I can experience intimacy with God. I can experience intimacy with my own spirit. I can experience intimacy with my partner, even if he doesn't change. I can experience intimacy with my children. I can experience intimacy with my body. Like, what? Did you guys know that? With the air I breathe, I can experience intimacy. The way that I see this, and I think I take this for granted, but I literally see the world through the lens of intimacy. It's like everything is one, right? Everything is connected to me, to my core, to my essence of being. And if that's really true, then can I walk outside and feel like the breeze is speaking to me and feel like the trees are moving and shaking, like to say hello to me in relation to me, to feel like the clouds in the sky and the planets and the stars and all of that is somehow one and connected with me? Can I also go and look at myself in the mirror and feel like my body is here for me? She speaks to me and I listen, and we have this relationship. We talk with each other, and I know that she has my best interest at hand, even when it seems like she's doing the exact opposite thing of what I need, right? Intimacy, right, you guys? Am I clicking? Are you getting this? I'd love for you to share in the comments, like, oh yeah, I know that. Like, tell me about it. I want to hear. I think back to some of these moments. One of my earliest memories of intimacy with God, it makes me emotional to think about, because I was just a little thing. I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, because my dad was still alive and doing well, and my parents were still together. This is how I go in my timeline. Like, okay, that trauma hadn't happened yet. That trauma hadn't happened yet. Okay, there we are. And I remember standing out on my front step, and it was Christmas time. So people had Christmas lights up, and it was dark out. I was an only child, and I had never really done this before. It was unusual behavior for me. I put on my jacket and I went out into my front yard by myself. And I think my dad was like, what is she doing out in the front yard? And so he put on his jacket and he came out. And I was just standing there staring up at the stars. It was a clear night, and I was looking at the stars. And I just remember him standing there next to me, and then kind of like going back in and just sort of keeping an eye on me from the window. And when I was staring at those stars, I felt like somehow I had a purpose, or somehow I belonged. And it was like a message from God. You know, hindsight, I can see a lot more clearly. At the time, I just felt this peace and expansion as a kid, and I couldn't even put words to what I had experienced, but it stuck with me. All these years, it stuck with me. That was intimacy with God, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, right? That was a moment of intimacy. One of those little pockets like we talked about at the beginning. We have these little tiny pockets of intimacy, and I think many of us can relate to that. But what about intimacy as our way of being, on a consistent, steady, raw diet of deep, true intimacy, right? That's what we're really going for, not pockets. So intimacy with the spirit, right? And I think about my marriage. You know, I think my wedding day, I did experience true intimacy. I remember looking over, in my religion, we kneel over an altar, and it's really beautiful. It's all very spiritual and sacred, and we kneel over an altar, and my husband and I had like giant smiles and tears just, you know, streaming down our cheeks. But like almost every moment that followed that for the next 5 years was like this. Us trying so hard and not having a dang clue. And it didn't help that I was 20 and he was 22. That did not help. But, man, like not a whole lot of real intimacy after that. It was very, very difficult. And I can remember one of the first moments And, you hear this term trauma bonding. Some trauma bonding is true intimacy. It's just that we don't want our whole relationship to be based in trauma bonding. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. But if you do, then you know what I'm saying. Trauma bonding or bonding through trauma is okay, and we all should do that. It means that we're open, we're vulnerable, we're sharing, right? But I can remember one of the first times that my husband and I really experienced true intimacy. We had done all this work. We were working with, my husband and I worked with therapists and workbooks and books and recovery programs and stuff like crazy. We worked so hard and it took so long, and we were trying to do everything the freest, cheapest way possible. But we had done this, this one bit of work where we wrote all these things about our lives, things that we had never told anybody. And then we just sat, and it took us like 10 hours. Somebody watched our kids for us, and we sat and we just shared those things with each other. And it was like, oh man, I just remember the whole day feeling like that, you had that in your life. And then also this like, oh my gosh, like, I love you. Thank you for showing me this. And then him too, vice versa. Like, what? Or like, you were mad at me during that time, or, just like this back and forth sharing. And it was so vulnerable. And there was no, there was not even any, sex or passion or anything like that involved. It was just us sharing from the depths of our soul. That's true intimacy, right? That's true intimacy. And then let's go to the physical place, right? It's those moments when you really feel connected during sex. If you're saying things like sex feels so robotic, or, it's like we're just like friends, or, sex is like a to-do list thing, then my guess is that a lot of what you're experiencing is not true intimacy. And it just requires that you figure out what it's going to take for you to fully show up. A lot of my clients, what it's going to take is them saying no for an extended period of time before their psyche, it sinks into their cells that you have full permission to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. And it's not for everybody, but sometimes that's what it takes. Like whatever it's going to take to get you to a place where you can show up fully and be seen. Really be seen. And this is going to affect if you're in business, right? All the time people are like, oh, I just have this hiding energy. I just, I want to be seen more. And I can tell I'm like sabotaging it. I do all the work and then I just sort of like sabotage it or shove it away. Or I only want to post stuff on my paid ads. I don't want anyone in my real life to know what I'm doing. All these things that we do because we're not comfortable with intimacy. So therefore, we're not going to show that to anybody else. But I can experience intimacy even in a post. I can experience intimacy even right here sharing with you guys. With myself, right? Like this is me saying, I see into me and I'm willing to show you those pieces of me with hopes that you will be able to do the same. Okay, so we've really broken down lots and lots of pieces. I would love to hear in the comments, what's your big takeaway? What's your big takeaway for your own life? What is that next piece for you with intimacy? What's that next step? What was the thing that I said that you were like, oh, I want that. Like, that's interesting to me. That sparks something for me. Let us know in the comments. Share in the comments. This period of time that we're living in is really interesting, isn't it? I think that we're kind of getting to a point, actually maybe we passed the point, of fatigue. We're really at this point of fatigue with everything that's gone on, and everyone's dealing with it differently, right? Like some are just like trying to pretend like nothing's happening. Like I just don't even want to deal with it. And then some people are just like buckled down even more, like, staying in our homes and doing all these things. And I think that we've really reached kind of a new layer with this. And it's not easy, is it? I just think about how I hear so many people mulling over their priorities and mulling over like, Am I living the life I want to live? Am I living the life I was meant to live? And I think that's a beautiful gift that's coming out of all the changes that we've been through. And what I would say to that is, what could be more important than this piece of intimacy? How can we make decisions if we don't know that inner voice? And really, what matters more than the relationships in our life? That's the whole piece, right? So whether we're already in a relationship or whether we're in this dating space, you know, like, how do you allow yourself to show up and be seen? Yeah, that's neat, Megan. Let's see here. Let me pull this in closer. We've got... Yeah, you know, it's just being really funny. Every time I click on it, it like clicks around. Ah, yeah. Nadia, and I need to sit with it for a while. That's beautiful. Right, Megan. Yeah, who knew that when we're like avoiding the needs of our body, or we're like denying what our body is saying, we're actually really disconnecting. We're creating that disconnection. And when we're disconnected from ourselves, it's almost impossible for us to connect with another. Yeah, right. True intimacy is inside us and not just something that happens between a couple. Yeah, intimacy. It's huge. It's everything. So cool, you guys. Well, thanks for joining. Listen, if this does pique something inside of you, and I mean, you know, in that deep core place where you know, like, this is something that I need. This is my next level. Intimacy is what, you know, I want more of in my life. Intimacy is where maybe I'm missing some pieces here. This is what I do. Reach out. Oops, sorry, got a phone call. Please reach out. Send me a DM, and I'd love to hop onto a call with you if we haven't done so already, and help you just explore, like, what are those next steps? It's always a journey, but it doesn't always have to be a long, grueling journey like it was for my husband and I. It doesn't always have to be fraught with so much pain. It doesn't always have to take so long before we can experience what we really want. Okay, you guys? So please do reach out if this is speaking to you. Take care, guys.